What's happening?
Those are threats.
No.
No,
this is the ship.
Is there a procession here? Order.
I want to confirm, Mr. Speaker, you to tell us whether it's within the standing orders in terms of the dress. The procedures and rules. You don't need to intimidate us through a new attire that you are not explaining to us.
They look very smart.
A constitution that had specific timelines for certain legislative proposals to be passed by this very House, and the legislative proposal to enable the implementation of not more than 2/3 gender rule is now 8 years, Mr. Speaker, and it has not been passed.
It is fair for them to know that you require not less than 233 of yourselves being present to pass. What do you think you may be agitating through the headgear? The headgear alone will not help.
Politics, they say, is a game of numbers. Yet, when the counting is done, the math betrays the true spirit of the supreme law as regards the gender agenda. And so it has been for decades.
Unbeknownst to many Kenyans, women have always been part of Kenya's constitutional reform movement. In 1962, during the Lancaster House conferences that produced the original independence constitution, there was one woman who was a delegate. Her name was Priscilla Bwawo. Priscilla was not allowed to speak, but she presented a memorandum on the rights of the African woman. And her memorandum demanded economic rights for women, equality of opportunity. There was an attempt by Honorable Phoebe Asio when the women came back from Beijing to have a motion moved in Parliament that would then have the old constitution amended to ensure that women were 1/3. The Asio motion failed. Honorable Beth Mugo then brought a motion for 1/3 in 1998. She was successful. However, what the women were told then was that in order for this to be effected, the constitution of the day would have to be amended because the constitution of the day fixed the number of parliamentary seats.
Long before the 2010 constitution, women largely watched from the outside of the country's leadership architecture, despite being more than half the population. In the Independence Parliament of 1963, there was not a single woman in the House. By 1997, women representation had grown to 4.1%. Decades of struggle for fairness and equal representation would, however, earn its print in the 2010 Constitution. Article 27 dictates that the state shall take legislative measures to implement the principle that no more than 2/3 of the members of elective or appointive bodies shall be of the same gender.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
But achieving this was a headache right from the drafting stage.
In order to ensure that women and other categories of the society are represented, we ourselves had recommended the mixed member proportion, which is the zebra method, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, based on a party list. We ended up with this system where you have special seats and which cannot give you the 1/3, and they have never been able to resolve that problem.
What the Constitution said was bring a law that would ensure that within the 5 years of implementation, which is within the lifetime of the 10th Parliament, we're in 12th Parliament, 10th Parliament, which I served in, you should have the gender quota resorted.
Well into the 12th Parliament, that constitutional requirement remains a pipe dream.
The motion is negatived.
All 4 attempts at enacting the law have been nothing short of filibuster, some arguing that there is an implementation vacuum in the Constitution. An April 2015 bill by Aina Bukoi Member of Parliament Samuel Chepkonga to have the gender law implemented gradually equally failed.
We are asking the Parliament of Kenya to seize
this historic moment and put our women in their rightful place, our daughters, our mothers, our wives in the rightful place in the leadership of our country. 30% of women leadership in Kenya, where we have 52% as women in our country, is not too much to ask.
Now you're saying it is going to be very expensive to have the 22 women in National Assembly or to have the 2 women in Senate. It will cost only 280 million. What will be more expensive is the referendum that you want to remove the women. All the party leaders who've gone on TV and said we support this, why haven't you all called PGs? Why haven't you whipped the members? You whip the members when you want anything passed, but when it comes to the women, President Uhuru Kenyatta was the first one to go and sign he for she. Let him actually do what he needs to do to pass this bill. This is becoming a joke.
And after 4 failed attempts, National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi infers the very constitution in delivering the burden at the doorstep of the state.
We have put that bill through our National Assembly 3 times. We have advocated very strongly for its passage. We have had a lot of resistance from the National Assembly in its passage.
There is no requirement anywhere. Go to the 5th schedule, go to the entire constitution that says Parliament shall enact a law to provide for 2/3. Never any reference to 2/3 in the constitution is in Article 27, clauses 6 and 8. And it says, the state shall ensure that the principle of not more than 2/3 of either gender is implemented in all elective bodies, including Football Association of Kenya. Yeah? Yeah? The state, not parliament.
It is a matter that has threatened the very existence of the 12th Parliament. The latest, a petition by the Law Society of Kenya asking Chief Justice David Maraga to write to President Uhuru Kenyatta, advising him to dissolve Parliament for failing to craft laws that enable implementation of Article 27 of the Constitution.
The Constitution is self-executing in that regard, in the sense that it says if Parliament fails to put in place legislation for realization of certain provisions of that Constitution, it can be dissolved. So I don't know why nobody has moved to dissolve Parliament.
If Parliament fails to implement the necessary legislation according to and within the time frame given by the courts, then the Chief Justice shall advise, not may, shall advise the President to dissolve Parliament, and Parliament shall be dissolved.
All eyes are now on the Chief Justice. He was petitioned in 2017. He did not dissolve. He has been petitioned again. The Law Society has added its voice to the voice of the women of Kenya because they were the first to petition. We are watching to see what the CJ will do.
However, Speaker Muturi says this argument is defeatist.
I'm willing to have the Parliament dissolved. And then let us see what, when you dissolve Parliament, there must be an election within 60 days. How are you going to ensure that the resulting Parliament will be 2/3, not more than 2/3 of either gender? There's no way. You know, these things, they are principles which we found ourselves in our Constitution, and they are very good. I think they speak to a greater good of society. But how we go about implementing them is a matter that we should think very carefully about. It's not something that you can go to dictate to the voter.
And therein lies the greatest challenge: how to implement a constitutional requirement in an environment of democratic election where people reserve the right to run for office and voters to choose as they please.
It is achievable through the ballot. But this route people are trying to go, or forcing Parliament to do this or the other, what? No. It is not appointive. In fact, if you look at Article 27, Clause 6 talks about appointive and elective offices. It is easy to achieve this in appointive positions. Elective, you would have to go and withdraw the power of the electorate in Article 1, sovereignty of the people.
Because the architecture was wrong. Once you have an architecture which says you will have women-only seats in 47 counties, then you have 290 constituencies which are gender neutral. You can then have all the 200 constituencies occupied by one gender. So whatever you do, the best thing that you can do is to have the 47 women seats and the nominations. You won't achieve 1/3. And that is why we said, and people did not listen to us at that time, don't increase the constituencies. Leave the constituencies at 210. Then the 90 seats be based on a party list, which must be man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman. Immediately you get 45 women. Then you have women representation from the 47 counties. Immediately you have 47 plus 45. Immediately you have 92. Then you have nomination. You've resolved the issue.
Article 81B will have been met. Now, Article 81B is the principles by which the electoral process is supposed to abide by, meaning that within the Elections Act and the Political Parties Act, there must be mechanisms to ensure not more than 2/3 of the same gender for elective public offices, so that when lists are being submitted for election, so through the nomination process, you should at least have mechanisms that work towards ensuring not more than 2/3 of the same gender. Then, having done all you can to ensure not more than 2/3 of the same gender, but then fall short, then you nominate.
If we are not able to come up with a law, there have to be other maybe reforms which will make the parliament comply.
But this disregard of the provisions of the law extends beyond the legislature to the executive.
The president's cabinet is not compliant with the 2/3 gender principle. We went to court in his first term. We got orders requiring that the next cabinet that comes into place, because we were 8 months to the election at the time of the petition, that the next cabinet that comes in must comply with the 2/3 gender principle. He did not comply. He has not complied. To date, the cabinet remains improperly constituted.
We've been successful in the executive. Like I've told you, as far as the executive is concerned, we have managed and we have secured that. We have been successful in the judiciary. We have been successful in devolved government. We have not been successful in the national or parliament.
I personally believe that the president and his administration used the 2/3 gender principle to begin the undermining of the Constitution. Because if they could successfully exclude half of the population and begin to unravel the Constitution, because remember, the first court order that has been disobeyed in Kenya post-2010 and under the first administration elected under the new Constitution is the issue of the 2/3 gender principle.
What has stopped President Uhuru Kenyatta from appointing 50-50? Women, 50% of women, 50% of men in his cabinet. That's not even a constitutional issue, by the way. It is an administrative issue. It's a leadership issue. President Paul Kagame of Rwanda has surpassed that. Many countries have done it. So sometimes, yes, you could try and be descriptive in a constitution, prescribe what must be done. But it also boils down that who are you entrusting to implement that constitution? So if you are entrusting, say, the implementation of this constitution to someone like President Uhuru, who clearly, with now 2 terms, doesn't believe in the idea of gender, because that's the truth. He doesn't believe in it. What has stopped him from, for example, picking at least 30% of women? It is his power.
No wonder then the National Assembly and the Senate have been unable to move forward on this. Bad example by the executive. So the two are encouraging each other, the two institutions, Parliament and the executive, and even the judiciary at the apex court or the Judicial Service Commission in bad behavior. I was just doing a rough audit of the counties, and I must tell you that out of the 47 counties, only 8 counties are compliant. Yet we have an IBC, a constitutional body which is charged with the responsibility of ensuring that the numbers balance. We have a National Gender and Equality Commission. We have a Human Rights Commission. We have a Commission on the Administration of Justice, among others. And we have a ministry responsible for gender. They can't crack the math.
You are not doing anybody a favor. You are not doing women a favor. The Constitution says, as a form of affirmative action, you need to implement the not more than 2/3 gender. But the debates are like, oh, those women want free things. What? They don't want free things.
As part of affirmative action, the Constitution in Article 97 provided for the election of 47 women representatives to the National Assembly to show up the numbers in the House. A decade later, and that position remains a subject of hot debate. Some argue that it should suffice in the quest for gender equity, whereas others want it scrapped altogether.
Now, that is a very misunderstood office. It is also part of affirmative action. But I have seen men arguing that they should also have a men's rep. No. You can't have a men's rep because you don't need affirmative action.
But as the quest for a legislative way out persists, constitutional lawyers argue that the challenge could be more cultural than it is a legal one.
It failed for one reason. Male chauvinism. Cultural. It's not legal, it's not religious, it's nothing. It's just the men were the majority in the house and they just did not understand why it was necessary which basically confirms the problem the Constitution was trying to resolve.
The system looks very patriarchal, very male chauvinistic, very anti-women.
For 5 years, we attended meetings with parliamentarians on the gender question. There's contempt for the gender issue, and I don't think this country has come to terms with the fact that as a nation we have contempt for women in leadership, generally. You know, we hold them to a much higher threshold, we are more vicious with them.
You can write a constitution in whatever language you want, create whatever institution you want. If the culture undermines that, you can't achieve it. On this gender question, I think that the culture is pushing back against the Constitution.
A job unfinished, or perhaps unfinishable, but as long as it remains ingrained in the supreme law, the powers that be must find a constitutionally agreeable solution, one way or the other.
The women of Kenya should stop, especially some at the helm, agreeing to be co-opted, to be cheerleaders for our brothers. We are equal partners on this journey. We were equal partners looking for the Constitution. The gains we achieved were not achieved by kneeling down or being cheerleaders. It was by sitting at the table as equal partners and discussing and negotiating. We as women must get our act together.
We have a long way to go in that area. The mere fact that there are people who think that it is some form of reward to women is an illustration of how far away we are.
It's not just about the third gender rule. You can achieve 50%. You just need to have the political goodwill.
sisi wanawake ulimwengu mzima, tusidi kuendelea, tusichoke. Mungu we, Mungu we.
Zainab Wandati, NTV, for we the people.